Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Jer by Unpopular Opinion. Today I am going to be ranking all of the DBD killers, in my opinion, from the easiest to use based off of purely M2 skills and their powers, perks, add-ons, things like that. There are a lot of people out there with a lot of opinions, so take mine for a grain of salt, but let's get right into this. I also have to say this is my second time filming this. I filmed the first one for about an hour and a half and only realized after the fact that there was no mic audio. Won't focus too much on what the actual abilities do, more so how well you could do if you were picking up this game and wanted to try a killer that might be easier, and what might take you longer to get better at. Let's just start here with, I'm going to break down each one of these killers based off easiest and work my way up, so I won't be going down in the row. So the first one that I'm going to put in the easiest category. This is one that I think no matter who picks up the game, no matter what your skill is, you could get kills very easily, and that's going to be Cenobite. The Kink Master here is one of the easiest killers in the game. If you did absolutely nothing, let's say you don't even bother doing chase, you only put pressure on the map, you use his base perks, a couple good add-ons, the game practically gives you wins to you, because the way that the chains work, they slow down the survivors. They have to take time off of doing gens or heals or saves to go get the box. And when they start working on that box, you get the opportunity to teleport to them. Almost guarantees you a free hit every single time they're working on that box. So Ceno is extremely easy to use, plus it has some really great base perks that really help in your quest of murder. The next one, this particular killer takes almost no skill to learn. If you've played Survivor at all and you've gone against a Booba before, you know that it is not hard to get kills with Bubba. You can use your chainsaw to sweep through survivors and get those downs so quickly. Even if you are not a camping Bubba, which please don't camp, he is so easy to get downs with, especially with his base perks. His perk loadout is so powerful and so anti-survivor. Bubba is one of those that even while using his chainsaw, you don't have as many problems as another chainsaw killer like Billy. The next killer in this lineup of easier is going to be the Doctor. Now the Doctor has some really great aura reading abilities by zapping the survivors and progressing them through the tiers of madness. You will start to notice illusionary doctors as they notice them. Now these illusionary doctors are not just for show and for kicks, they are for your information. And that illusionary doctor will generally be pointing in the direction of where the survivor's at. So it is very easy to get some information on where to go and how to put pressure on them. On top of the fact that the doctor's madness can sometimes prevent them from even healing. Once they get into Madness 3, if they choose not to rid themselves of their madness, they will not be able to do much of anything until they are done with that. So you can really put a lot of pressure on the map very quickly and very easily, on top of the fact that the Doctor has some of the best anti-looping abilities of everyone in the game. The next easier, in my opinion, is the Wraith. Now Wraith has a lot of great movement speed, which makes up for the fact that Wraith's basic power doesn't actually do much to hinder the survivors. Because of your invisibility and because of your movement speed, Wraith is very easy to body block loops, to body block pallets, to put pressure on survivors in ways that you wouldn't be able to do with others because of the stealth ability. Now Wraith's base perks are not the best. They can be used effectively depending on what you are using, but Wraith has really great add-ons which make gameplay even easier. If you have a challenge to break pallets or breakable walls or kick gens, Wraith is going to be your go-to for that because of the fact that Wraith has so many add-ons to make him faster while he's doing those tasks. The next on this list is Miss Dredgiana Grande. Now the Dredge is extremely easy to pick up. The Dredge is basically a more powerful version of the Onryo and is able to teleport across the map very quickly. And because of the Dredge's base ability of Nightfall, you can really surprise survivors by being able to take advantage of the Oblivious status effect. This is one of those that's much like Cenobite, that if you do almost nothing, you are guaranteed at least one kill in this trial because of how darkness affects the map and how easy it is to catch survivors unaware. The next is one of the more frustrating killers in the game if you play Survivor, and that is the Legion. The Legion's ability to put the Deep Wound status effect on any survivor and the ability to drag on the game for years and years makes Legion a very effective killer in slowing down the game and in slowing down the progress of the trial to ensure that you can get kills. Legion is very powerful with their ability to be able to vault, their ability to be able to make their way quickly across the map through their frenzy. Legion is a very easy killer if you are even slightly decent at survivor tracking. Legion makes it very easy for newer killers to sort of gauge what survivors are doing and what routes and paths they are taking as they navigate the map. Next in this is the Plague. Now, Plague is able to put a lot of pressure on the map very easily by her projectile vomit. After she got White Girl wasted last night, she just can't stop throwing up on stuff, and every time that survivors interact with that, they get sick. And if we've learned anything from 2020 and beyond, is that people do not like to quarantine when they are sick, and they will touch each other. They will put their hands on each other's bodies to heal, they'll grab them off the hook, they will work on gens together and progressively get sick. This helps you because they get that broken status effect, and it is very easy to knock down survivors very quickly, especially survivors who are not paying attention or are screwing over the rest of their friends in the trial and solo queue by consistently cleansing. That will help you. Those pools where they cleanse at give you the option to get a ranged attack of projectile vomit, which deals damage. So when you have that one Claudette that just cannot stop cleansing, and that Nia has been broken for the last 10 minutes, if you see her and your fruit punch kicks in, you get a free down. And of the ranged killers, Plague is one of the easier ones to learn. Next, moving into the easy category and out of the easier category is Miss Piggy. Miss Piggy is an icon, and she is a legend, and she just wants to invite you to her party by putting fancy little bear trap party hats on your head until you explode and get to move on to the next plane of existence. Pig is an easy killer because she has the ability of stealthing herself, but unlike characters like Wraith, there is a slight bit more strategy and skill to how you sneak up on survivors. Unlike someone like Ghostface, who also relies on stealth, there is less of a learning curve with how she operates. As far as killers who zoom forward, Pig is the easiest one to learn because she does have a little bit of turn. It's not a super wide cone, but she does have a pretty big hitbox where that is concerned. And the party hats, much like Cenobite, if left to do almost nothing, if you put party hats on survivors and they choose not to take those off, or if they don't get to a box in time, their head will explode as long as generators are continuing. Really good survivors know how to counter Pig, so she's one of those that requires a little bit more precision on, and with the recent buffs to Pig, it makes it even easier to play her. Next is the Nightmare, and I put Freddy here because of his base perks and add-ons. I do think Freddy does take a little bit of skill to get used to. Unlike someone like Dredge, there's a little more strategy that goes in because Dredge travels through lockers. Freddy can only travel through generators, and there are only 8 of those in a trial, where there are dozens of lockers, depending on what map you're in. So Freddy, you have to be planning a little bit more. You have to be thinking a lot more about where survivors are going and how they're going to play the game, putting your blood pools down to hinder them for a short bit of time really works very well in very specific maps. There are some open maps like Coldwind or Ormond that are going to be very difficult to get that hindered status effect because it'll be very easy for survivors to see those blood pools and just scoot right around them and not deal with them. But Freddy has some great add-ons that make him an extremely effective killer and very easy to pick up. Next is Miss Mariah Carey, Michael Myers, otherwise known as the Shape. Now, Myers is a very powerful killer, and much like Bubba, doesn't require the most skill in the world, but if you want to be an effective Michael Myers, you need to know how to edge your power so that you get it right up to the mark. So when you're chasing someone healthy, you just press a button very quickly to stalk, get into your tier 3, and get your down very quickly. Now, if you are playing with Myers and you get into a chase early, you forget to use your stock power, you have a very tiny knife. And it's not about the size of the knife. It's about how you use it. And with Myers in particular, you need to really be conscientious of the tier that you're in. 1 has the smallest knife. 2, it's about semi. And by 3rd, you are at your full effectiveness and you're ready to party as long as he keeps his knife up. So with Myers, he requires some skill to learn, but it's not extremely difficult once you get used to the power. Next in this easy line is Miss Hagatha Christie, best-selling novelist, bog whisperer, and all-around hex girl. Miss Hagatha is able to transport through the map as long as her traps are set and activated by a survivor. She's easier, in my opinion, to play than someone like Trapper because when one of her traps is deactivated, she just gets it back in her inventory. She doesn't have to go searching around for it and pick it up. So she is a good intro to learn how to get better at someone like Trapper. She's pretty comparable with Freddy as where you are putting the blood pools down in very strategic places, and with Hag, she has great anti-looping, which makes her an easier killer to pick up early. Now moving into the mid-tier, more medium, is the first one, Evan Mcmillan, aka Daddy, aka the Trapper, aka my main. Trapper is, I think, a medium tier killer because he is so easily counterable. I think Trapper is one of the easiest for survivors to bully because his traps can sometimes be so out in the open and so easy to identify, you could easily not get any kills. But with some skill and learning where survivors are going to go and tracking their movements, predicting what they're going to do next and how they're going to utilize the map is going to be your best friend. Trapper is one of the better ones to learn if you are trying to learn survivor movements and predict their next move. You have to be several steps ahead of them. But in my opinion, Trapper has some of the best add-ons in the game, but they're not quite enough to make him an easier killer because you have to know how to use them. Great add-ons don't help if you don't know how to use them. Next is Oni fans. We love the Oni. We love how daddy he is. His power essentially is like the American Red Cross, except it doesn't discriminate against gay people, and he's a daddy. His power makes him become stronger and daddier as he absorbs blood. You can really use the blood orbs for map awareness, that when you're in an area that previously didn't have any blood, and then you suddenly see some, you know that there is a sneaky Jake walking around over there, and that you can grab him up while he is still injured. Oni has a lot of movement when he dashes forward. We talked about that with Pig, that she's one of the easier ones to learn as far as that dash, because that dash is short. Oni has the same type of ability as Billy does, where he can sort of infinitely go, except he doesn't have collision. So if Oni's going and he happens to run into something, he won't stop. He'll keep going until you let go of the button. But the problem is that he's very easy to counter because Oni likes to lift up his giant sword while he's in his main power, show off his armpits, and then bring it all the way down. And that is easy to counter for survivors who are good, which is why Oni is sort of mid-tier as far as difficulty to learn. but once you get good with him, it's very easy to figure out how to navigate the map and how to manipulate it so that you can get the most out of your power. The next I'm going to put is Slinger. And of the ranged killers, Slinger is about medium tier, and I know some people are probably going to jump down my throat about why Huntress is not in this spot, but honestly, I feel like Slinger is a slight bit easier to learn than Huntress. Huntress's cone of her hatchets are really big, and what that hitbox is really irrational sometimes. Slinger is pretty straightforward, but you have to be good at FPS. And I think after some skill, you can really learn how to put pressure on the map by giving the deep wound status effect with his weapon. There are a lot of ways that you can manipulate the map, aiming through tiny spaces in order to pull a survivor towards you. There are ways that you can really mess up a survivor's day just by his base perks. He's got two of the best base perks in the entire game in my opinion, and that's Gearhead and Dead Man's Switch. These are fantastically strong perks that will help any Slinger become even greater. But he does require skill with learning how to aim, but I do think he's easier learning to aim than Huntress, and especially from Twinkster. Next is Dorito Daddy, aka the Executioner, aka Pyramid Head. Pyramid Head is a very strong killer. Pyramid Head is one of the only killers that has a natural Mori, the only other one being the Onryo. And because of these anti-looping abilities that he has, with being able to shoot the Rites of Judgment forward with slightly less precision than you would need with someone like Slinger or Huntress or Twinkster or any of the other ranged killers, you can cause a lot of damage and really bottleneck a pallet and use that to your advantage to slow down survivors and put damage and injuries on them. The next one is the Onryo, and I put her at medium because she is easy to learn. Her power is pretty straightforward. It runs very much similar to Wraith, except there's not a cooldown when she comes out of her invisibility. She's just tiny. And so because of that, her field of vision is smaller than other killers. She oftentimes misses survivors in plain sight just because of where they're hiding. And she has less of that visibility around the map, which makes her a slightly more difficult killer to play as. She can naturally Mori people, but it is very difficult to get those states onto survivors. She has some of the strongest perks in the entire game. You could put any of her 3 base perks on almost any killer, and you would have a pretty flawless build. She's one of the few that I think has everything, but she's really hindered by her size and by the way that she travels around the map to put pressure down. Otherwise, if she could put more pressure in and have more anti-loop, she would probably be an easy killer. It requires a little more precision and skill to learn her. And now we move into the harder category, and our first one is going to be Mommy Huntress. Now, Huntress is, in my opinion, one of the most inconsistent killers. Your hitbox or your hatchet is sometimes massive and is this big, and sometimes it's this big. It is so inconsistent with what she can hit over and what she can hit through, but once you start to learn her and once you get good with her, she is an extremely effective and terrifying killer to play with and against. Now, Huntress's biggest con is that she is auditioning for The Voice and she is constantly practicing, and so survivors can hear her coming from a mile away. She's more distracting than Nemesis. I'll get into him. Because survivors can anticipate where she is on the map, you have to rely on your range, and that is difficult depending on what map you're in. If you're on certain maps that are outdoors, you can really take advantage of the fact that you are so far away from them, and she's one of the easiest to get snipes with, but it requires so much precision and so much learning, which is why she's a harder killer, in my opinion. And speaking of the devil, the next one is going to be Nemesis. Now, Nemesis is a very difficult killer to learn because he starts out with a very small tentacle. Nemesis does need to get his tentacle bigger if he wants to actually put any pressure on the map. Now, similar to the doctors, illusionary doctors that show up on the map, Nemesis has zombies that appear on the map and give you a lot of information as to where survivors are at. They can actually put pressure on survivors by forcing them off gens, by putting damage on them, by getting them infected with the T virus, but zombies are oftentimes very easily counterable, so you kind of have to use them to your advantage. If you see that a zombie has its hands up, then that means it's in a chase with the survivor and you need to go that way. If you start seeing a zombie with its hands up and it starts doing the thriller, that's when you need to disconnect. Nemesis is a very powerful killer, but his biggest con is that he's loud. You can hear him from a mile away, just stomping. Much like Huntress, it is very easy to counter him. Once you start hearing those feet clogging on the ground, you can book it and hide somewhere before he even gets close to you, which is why it takes a long time to learn him. But when you get your tentacle up to tier 3, you are very powerful against these survivors. The next in the harder line is Ghostface. Now, Ghostface is another stealth killer, but he relies on shrouding himself in darkness, in sexy, dark, daddy energy to sneak up and mark survivors with an exposed status effect. This status effect is very easily counterable. It is very easy to break Ghostface's shroud. It is very easy to hide from him. Ghostface is very quiet. He is one of the most silent killers. The only indication you'll get is his cloak floating in the wind, and oftentimes survivors aren't paying much attention to that. So it's easy to sneak up on them sometimes, but it's not always the easiest to mark them. So Ghostface takes a long time to learn, and he's much more difficult than someone like Pig, and extremely difficult in comparison to Wraith. Our next killer is, in my opinion, one of the weakest killers in the game, and that is the Clown. Clown's main ability is throwing bottles at survivors and hindering them and blurring their vision. But Clown is extremely easy to counter if you are watching where he's throwing bottles. If you avoid certain loop spots, you might never get hit by a Clown by his M1 if you are good at this game, which is why he's tough. Clown mains are not to be messed with. They are on another plane of existence because they have put so much time into hearing this nasty man cackle and cough and wheeze his chain-smoking cigarette breath all over the map, but you can hear him coming from so far away because his music is so loud. So it is very easy for you as a Clown killer to maybe never even get a hook on survivors because he's easy to counter. So he takes a long time to learn. The next in the harder territory is the Demogorgon, and I put Demo here because unlike characters like Pig or Oni or Billy, when Demo launches forward, Demo launches in a straight line. Demo cannot turn right or left. So when Demo opens up his flower petals and launches, it is extremely easy to move away from that and avoid the attack altogether. Now, Demo has really great anti-looping abilities with being able to shred through breakable walls or shred through pallets and can quickly get to survivors. But one of the biggest advantages of a killer in DBD is your familiarity with them as a survivor. I have said this since I started playing the game, and I will say it until I stop playing the game, that if you want to be good at one or the other, you have to play the opposite. And in order to get good with killers, you have to know how to counter them. You have to know how you would play against that killer. And since Stranger Things was removed, and there are very few Demogorgons out in the wild, it is not likely you will know how to counter it. So Demo is harder because there's less knowledge of how to actually counter him. You don't know what survivors are going to do when they go against you. There is that element of surprise that they might panic a little bit because they don't know how to operate with you. They don't know how your power works. So it's wildly inconsistent on how to play a Demogorgon match. But since there are so many veteran survivors out there, they know how to counter him. Demogorgon is very difficult to play because of that reason. And now, wrapping up the harder list is Twinkster. Now, Daddy Ji-woon is extremely difficult to get knife hits with. I have gone against many a trickster who end up wasting all of their knives just trying to get one health state down. It is so easy to miss. He is extremely difficult to even get a hit on because unlike someone like Slinger or Huntress, where one hit of the Redeemer or one hatchet hit will bring a health state down. With Trickster, because you have to get all 6 knives in progression before those start decreasing, it is oftentimes very difficult. Trickster moves slightly slower. Trickster's music is very easy to spot, and because he giggles, it is easy to tell when he is close to you in chase. So for survivors who are unafraid of you, who don't look behind themselves in chase, it's easy to figure out where he's at and where they need to move in order to dodge him. If your movements are sporadic enough, you can kind of Z formation your way out of getting hit by knives. Plus, as he's throwing his knives, he's slower, so you get less distance. Trickster doesn't have the best anti-looping. Trickster doesn't have the best of anything. So it takes a lot of skill to learn him and a lot of failing in order to get better. But I think Trickster has some of the better perks in the game and has some really strong add-ons. Now moving into the very difficult killers, the very first one is going to be Victor and Charlotte, aka the twins. Now, the reason why they're difficult is similar to Demogorgon. As Survivor, we're probably not going to see twins too often in a trial, so it's hard to tell how to counter them. Their power is weak. Their power is only for Charlotte to release her broad titty brother and have him run around the map and try to get an injury. It is extremely easy to counter Victor when you hear him growling towards you. If he misses his jump, a survivor can kick him and destroy him, and maybe you are on the opposite side of the map by the time you found a survivor, so you either wasted your opportunity of getting a hit, or you have to waste time getting Charlotte to them and getting closer, but by the time you get there, they could have gone to the other side of the map, and you could have done the full Scooby-Doo thing where you just passed right by each other. Because of that, they're extremely difficult to learn. They can be, I think, some of the most disheartening killers to play as, because it can get so easy to be frustrated when you are Victor and you're this tiny and your vision is this small, and you immediately get vibe checked by a survivor who kicks you out of nowhere, and all you wanted was to try and get a hit. If you want to put pressure down as Victor, Charlotte cannot release him when she's in certain areas. And because of that, and because of that map awareness, and because of that player awareness, you have to know where you can release him. That's disheartening for a lot of players. So that makes them in the very difficult category. The twins have, in my opinion, some of the weakest base perks in the entire game next to Huntress. Next in the very difficult category is Billy. Now, Billy has, in my opinion, some of the best perk loadout in the entire game. Much like Oni, Billy has a range when he's in his full chainsaw of being able to move left or right. However, he has collision. So if you bump into a box or a tree or a rock or a crow that happened to fly off or some spit in the wind from when you and Jin spat in your direction, you will collide with that and you will stop your run. Unlike Bubba, who is a very easy killer to get chainsaw hits with, Billy is very difficult. Next in this list is the Spirit. And the Spirit is very difficult because she relies on auditory cues. Spirit is the only one that relies solely on your hearing, which people who have any type of impairment, people who might be streaming and talking to chat while they're also trying to use their ability are going to have a hard time. And she needs to use that information in order to find survivors, because unlike Wraith, when she is invisible, she doesn't see anything. All she sees is scratch marks and pools of blood. So if you are going against an Iron Will Michaela, you are going to have a very difficult time finding her unless things are dead silent. So you need to have, one, a great headset in order to hear, or a great set of speakers on your computer to hear where they're at. And on top of the fact that she doesn't have a lot of great anti-looping. She relies solely on your ability to track survivors. Next, and I'm sure I'm going to get flack for even putting her up here, is the artist. Now, the artist's ability is to put 3 crows on the map, and only one of those crows will actually deal damage. The other 2 are specifically for hindering survivors and making them get rid of those crows. Now, the hinder effect does help, but good survivors will just run until they find a locker, jump in there, jump out, gets rid of the crows. Artist is one of those killers that's very easy to not even get a singular hook in a game if you are just picking her up, because she relies so much more on map awareness and survivor movement than almost any other killer. Plus, her anti-looping is only effective if survivors don't know what they're doing, because her crows eventually will evaporate into the air. If a survivor sees at a strong TNL that you've put down some crows in an attempt to stop their loop, they could just flee for another tile, and then you've dropped your crows and you wasted the time to set them for nothing, and you have to wait for your power to refresh so that you can put more down. Artist, in my opinion, is one of the most easily counterable killers, which makes her very weak. Not quite as weak as Clown, but not super effective unless you put the time into her. She doesn't have great add-ons, but her perks are very strong. Next up, it gets to the top 2, in my opinion, that are the most difficult to learn, and the second in this list is Nurse. Now, Nurse is very difficult to play as. She is the slowest killer in the game because she has so much movement with her power. Once you get good with her, she is one of the most powerful in the entire game. And for, in my opinion, the most difficult killer in the game to learn is Bleat, the gooeyest of hedgehogs. His power is disorienting. The way that he bounces against things, as the map is zooming past you and you have collision with something and immediately need to find something else to get collision towards, it can be very overwhelming for new killers to be able to track and plan out where the survivors are going and how you are going to get them. If you are trying to break a pallet, it takes a lot of precision and exact timing. Blight becomes a very difficult character to just pick up and be good with. And much like the twins, I feel like Blight can oftentimes be very disheartening. People will attempt to play a Blight game, will get their butts handed to them, and will feel bad that they were not able to get a singular hit because they just didn't plan out their line of attack right. And that is the biggest thing, is your map awareness and how you can use each obstacle to your advantage. Now, with this whole list, these are not characters that are effective as killers, or if I think they're good as killers, that would be a different tier list. Let me know if you want even that content, and I'd be more than happy to explain who I think is actually good at this game and who is actually terrifying, and who are strong killers and who are weak ones. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are, if you would rearrange anyone here, and I will see you next time.